Speculation has once again surrounded Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, with fresh divorce rumors colliding with a far more personal anxiety. Harry's growing concern that he may be running out of time to fully repair his fractured bond with his father, King Charles III. From the outside, their recent appearance at the Sundance Film Festival painted a picture of unity. In the sharp winter air of Utah, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex arrived hand in hand, promoting their new documentary Cookie Queens with polished smiles and carefully coordinated outfits. Their body language suggested solidarity, as though the upheavals of the past several years had unfolded exactly as intended. On camera, they looked aligned, composed, and very much together. Welcome viewers to my channel. Please subscribe, like my video and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next update. Yet away from curated red carpets and choreographed public moments, a more complicated narrative appears to be unfolding in Montecito. Behind the gates of their California home, insiders describe a couple whose professional trajectories and daily rhythms are increasingly diverging. It is not dramatic confrontation that is fueling the rumors, but rather a gradual drifting apart, a subtle uncoupling that has reignited speculation about the state of their marriage. When Harry and Meghan stepped back from royal duties in 2020 and relocated to the United States, they promised a bold new chapter. The move was framed as a quest for financial independence, creative control, and emotional breathing room from what they described as an oppressive institutional environment. For a time, that vision seemed to materialize. Multi-million-pound media deals followed. Archewell became the umbrella brand for podcasts, documentaries, philanthropic ventures, and high-profile interviews. The Sussexes appeared to be building an empire on their own terms. But the momentum has shifted. According to recent reports, the couple are now pursuing increasingly separate professional agendas. Meghan, 44, is said to be deeply invested in developing her lifestyle brand, as ever, tapping into Hollywood networks and the lucrative wellness market. Her focus appears firmly planted in California's celebrity ecosystem, cultivating partnerships and expanding her personal identity beyond the royal narrative. Harry, 41, by contrast, is described as searching for clarity about his next chapter. While still committed to the Invictus Games, the sporting event he founded for wounded veterans, and to paid speaking engagements, he reportedly has little enthusiasm for Hollywood networking. The social rituals of Los Angeles, insiders suggest, do not naturally suit him. Publicly, the pair continue to present a united front, often framing their journey as one of shared resilience, as against the world. But privately, their schedules reportedly rarely overlap. Separate offices, different social circles, and independent professional obligations have become routine. They reportedly reunite for key appearances, reinforcing the image of partnership, but much of their day-to-day existence unfolds independently. Financial pressures add another layer of strain. Harry's memoir Spare was a commercial triumph, reportedly earning close to £20 million in 2023. However, their expenses remain substantial. Security costs alone are estimated to run into the millions annually. Their Montecito property carries a significant mortgage, alongside staffing costs, public relations retainers, and production overheads. The financial freedom they once celebrated has proven expensive to sustain. Meanwhile, several cornerstone projects have faltered. Their high-profile Spotify deal ended. Netflix projects have underperformed or quietly concluded. Meghan's lifestyle series With Love, Meghan was reportedly cancelled after 2 seasons. A long-anticipated documentary following Harry's work in Africa failed to materialize. Even their polo-themed series lasted just 1 season. While they remain attached as producers to a film adaptation of The Wedding Date, by Jasmine Guillory, the era of presenting every venture as a joint crusade appears to have faded. For many couples, evolving ambitions in midlife would be entirely ordinary. But for Harry and Meghan, divergence carries heavier symbolism. They did not simply leave jobs, they exited a centuries-old institution in spectacular fashion. That departure reshaped the monarchy's public image and severed long-standing family ties. Amid swirling speculation, there is no confirmed indication that divorce proceedings are underway. They continue to issue statements jointly and attend major events together. Official communications still bear the title, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Publicly, they insist their marriage remains strong. However, reports suggest that palace officials have quietly prepared contingency plans should a separation ever occur. According to insider claims, Discussions have included the possibility of a structured financial settlement and carefully negotiated arrangements concerning their children, Archie and Lilibet. Such planning does not confirm an impending split, but it reflects an institution wary of being blindsided again after previous royal crises. Beyond marital speculation lies a more poignant dimension: Harry's desire to reconcile with his family. His departure from royal life was accompanied by candid criticism of the British press and the monarchy's internal culture. In court testimony in London in January 2026, he described tabloid coverage as having made his wife's life an absolute misery. Meghan's time in Britain was marked by intense scrutiny and, at times, racist undertones in media commentary. Given that history, her reluctance to spend extended periods in the UK is understandable. Harry's perspective, however, appears to be evolving. The King's cancer diagnosis in 2024 reportedly had a profound emotional impact. Harry flew to London soon after the news broke and later visited his father at Clarence House. The meetings were described as cordial, even hopeful. Observers suggest that the reality of illness has sharpened Harry's awareness of time, and of unfinished conversations. That awareness creates a delicate tension within his marriage. Sources claim Harry is increasingly drawn to Britain, eager to rebuild bridges while there is still opportunity. Meghan, by contrast, has little desire to reinsert herself into the environment she associates with personal distress. A compromise reportedly involves Harry making regular solo trips to the UK for work and family visits while Meghan remains primarily in California. Such arrangements, though practical, risk emotional distance. Friends reportedly worry that prolonged separations could deepen existing divides. While Meghan's schedule is described as demanding and Harry is said to be more withdrawn when in the US, attempts to prioritize time together sometimes fall victim to professional obligations. The underlying reality may be less sensational than headlines suggest. Beneath titles, estates, and streaming contracts lies a recognizable human conflict: a husband feeling the pull of an aging parent and unresolved family fractures, and a wife unwilling to return to a setting that she believes caused her significant harm. Balancing those forces is no small task. For Harry, the fear is twofold. On one side is the possibility that reconciliation with his father could come too late. On the other is the unsettling thought that the Californian escape, the decision intended to protect his family and secure their happiness, might inadvertently strain the very relationships it was meant to safeguard. In the end, the speculation about divorce may be less about imminent separation and more about visible strain under extraordinary circumstances. Whether the Sussexes can navigate diverging ambitions, financial realities, and the emotional gravity of illness and reconciliation remains to be seen. What is certain is that time, both in marriage and in family, has become Harry's most pressing concern. The cameras always catch the smiles first. They freeze them in glossy perfection, frame them in flattering light, and beam them around the world as proof that everything is exactly as it should be. When Prince Harry and Meghan Markle stepped into the crisp mountain air at Sundance, fingers intertwined and shoulders angled toward one another with practiced ease, it seemed like a continuation of a story they had been telling for years. A story of unity, of resilience, of two people who had defied an ancient institution and built something new in its place. In that moment, beneath the flash of lenses and the hum of festival chatter, they looked like the authors of their own destiny. But stories, especially royal ones, have layers beneath their polished surfaces. Inside their Montecito home, far from the orchestrated choreography of public appearances, a quieter narrative has been unfolding. It is not loud or explosive. There are no slammed doors or public accusations. Instead, there is something subtler and perhaps more dangerous: distance measured not in miles but in priorities. Separate calendars, separate meetings, separate visions of what the next decade should look like. When Harry and Meghan left Britain in 2020, the move felt seismic. The departure from royal duties was framed as both a rebellion and a rescue mission. They would seek financial independence. They would create freely. They would escape what Harry described as a relentless and often cruel media machine. For Meghan, it was a chance to breathe outside the suffocating glare of tabloid hostility. For Harry, it was an act of protection, an attempt to shield his wife and, eventually, their children from the fate he believed had haunted his own mother. The early days in California carried the charge of reinvention. Deals were announced in rapid succession. Interviews dominated headlines. Archewell emerged as the banner under which their philanthropic and media ambitions would flourish. There were podcasts, documentaries, speaking engagements. Each appearance reinforced the message that they were thriving, that the gamble had paid off. Yet reinvention is rarely as simple as it appears. Over time, the sheen of novelty faded. The podcast partnership that once symbolized creative freedom came to an abrupt end. Streaming projects that had been heralded as groundbreaking struggled to maintain momentum. Some ideas never made it past development. Others arrived quietly and departed even more quietly. The headlines shifted from celebration to scrutiny. Within this shifting landscape, Meghan's focus sharpened. She leaned into lifestyle branding, cultivating an image that blended aspirational elegance with California wellness culture. Meetings multiplied. Networking dinners stretched late into the evening. Her ambitions seemed not diminished but refined, directed toward building something distinctly hers, something that could stand independently of royal memory. Harry, meanwhile, appeared to move at a different tempo. His devotion to the Invictus Games remained unwavering, rooted in genuine connection rather than branding strategy. He spoke passionately about veterans, about purpose, about service. But outside of those commitments, there lingered an uncertainty. The Hollywood ecosystem, with its calculated charm and transactional alliances, did not seem to ignite him. The man who once thrived within the structured clarity of royal duty now stood in a space defined by self-direction, and that freedom carried its own weight. In public, they remained synchronized. Joint statements continued. Appearances were carefully curated. The image of partnership endured. But privately, friends began to notice the widening gap between their daily lives. It was not that they disagreed openly. It was that their worlds were expanding in different directions, pulling them toward separate horizons. Complicating everything was the undercurrent of family. Harry's estrangement from his father, King Charles III, had once seemed absolute. Interviews and memoir pages laid bare his grievances, his anger, his sense of betrayal. He spoke candidly about feeling unsupported, about institutional indifference, about wounds that stretched back to childhood. The rupture felt permanent. Then came the diagnosis. Cancer has a way of stripping away pride and posturing. It collapses long-held resentments into urgent questions about time. When Harry boarded a flight to London after learning of his father's illness, it was not as a rebel prince but as a son. Observers speculated about the meeting at Clarence House, about the tone of their conversation, about whether reconciliation was truly possible. No one could hear what was said over tea, but the mere act of sitting together again signaled something profound. For Harry, the reality of his father's mortality introduced a new urgency. Regret, once abstract, became tangible. The possibility of losing a parent without fully mending the bond is a fear that transcends royalty. It is painfully ordinary, and it began to tug at him in ways that life in California could not easily soothe. Meghan's memories of Britain, however, are shadowed by hostility. Her time within the royal fold was marked by relentless scrutiny, accusations, and an undercurrent of racism in certain media corners. The idea of returning for extended periods carries emotional cost. While she supports Harry's desire to reconnect, the soil of the UK is not neutral ground for her. It is a place layered with hurt. Thus emerges the central tension. Harry's growing pull toward Britain, toward family, toward unfinished conversations. Meghan's rootedness in California, where she has cultivated professional momentum and personal safety. Compromise, for now, means travel. Harry scheduling visits. Meghan maintaining her base. On paper, it appears workable. In practice, it means more time apart. At home in Montecito, the days pass in overlapping but distinct rhythms. Meghan's calendar is dense with strategy sessions and brand development. Harry's commitments are more sporadic, leaving stretches of quiet that friends describe as reflective, even withdrawn. They make efforts to carve out evenings together, but ambition and obligation are relentless companions. Divorce rumors swirl predictably around any visible shift. The public, conditioned by decades of royal drama, reads distance as prelude to disaster. Yet there is no concrete sign of legal separation, no official indication of imminent collapse. What exists instead is something more ambiguous, a marriage under pressure from competing loyalties and diverging futures. Strip away the titles and the estates, and the picture becomes strikingly human. A husband wrestling with the fear of losing his father before forgiveness is fully spoken. A wife determined never to return to a place that once left her feeling exposed and unprotected. Two people who once stood united against the world now negotiating how much of that world they are willing to re-enter. The photographs from Sundance captured a single moment, frozen and immaculate. But photographs cannot reveal the conversations that follow when the lights dim and the car doors close. They cannot measure the silence that sometimes stretches between two people who love each other but are pulled by different tides. Chapter 1 of this evolving story is not about scandal or betrayal. It is about time. Time running forward in California boardrooms and wellness launches. Time running backward in London drawing rooms and hospital corridors. Time pressing in on a son who fears he may have waited too long. And time quietly testing whether the grand escape that once symbolized salvation can withstand the gravitational pull of home. Distance rarely announces itself with a single dramatic moment. It does not arrive like a storm tearing through rooftops. More often, it seeps in quietly, disguised as busyness, as ambition, as necessary compromise. In Montecito, the days began to move with a rhythm that felt productive on the surface and fragmenting underneath. Mornings in their sprawling California home were once described as calm and intentional. Sunlight spilling across wide glass windows. The Pacific air drifting inland. Coffee taken on terraces overlooking manicured gardens. In the early years after their move, there had been a sense of shared construction, as if every meeting, every phone call, every brainstorming session was a brick in the foundation of a new life they were building together. Now the construction seemed to be happening in separate wings. Meghan's team expanded first. Strategy calls about branding and product placement filled her calendar. Conversations about her lifestyle venture demanded attention to detail and precision. She was determined not merely to launch a brand but to craft an identity that would outlast headlines. She studied market trends, refined messaging, and leaned into the language of empowerment and self-definition. California suited that transformation. It allowed her to step forward not just as a duchess but as a businesswoman shaping her own narrative. Harry watched with admiration but also a quiet uncertainty. His own path felt less clearly drawn. The Invictus Games remained a source of authenticity and pride. When he spoke with veterans, his purpose sharpened. There, he did not feel like an exile or a celebrity. He felt useful, necessary, grounded. But those moments were periodic. Between them stretched expanses of time that no longer had the structured cadence of royal engagements. In Britain, his days had once been mapped months in advance by palace aides. There had been ceremonies, military visits, charitable patronages, and the steady drumbeat of duty. The structure had been suffocating at times, but it had also been clarifying. Now freedom demanded self-direction, and self-direction exposed doubts he had never needed to confront before. Friends noticed that he spent more time reading British news than he admitted publicly. The monarchy's movements, his father's schedule, even parliamentary debates about royal funding caught his attention. He would scroll through updates late at night while the house grew still. The Atlantic Ocean no longer felt like a bold symbol of independence but like a widening stretch of water separating him from unfinished conversations. When King Charles III's health became fragile, the emotional equation shifted decisively. Illness reduces abstraction. The grievances that once felt urgent are forced to compete with something more elemental, mortality. Harry's flight to London after the diagnosis was swift and understated. No grand speeches, no media choreography. Just a son boarding a plane. The reunion at Clarence House was brief but significant. Observers could only speculate about the words exchanged, but those close to the situation described it as restrained and cautious rather than explosive. There were no dramatic reconciliations, no public declarations. Instead, there was something quieter. A recognition that time is not guaranteed. Returning to California after that visit felt different for Harry. The sunshine seemed almost too bright. The ease of Montecito life clashed with the image of his father navigating treatment schedules and constitutional responsibilities. He began speaking more openly in private about wanting to spend longer stretches in Britain. Not permanently, not a return to royal duty in its old form, but something more regular. More connected. For Meghan, those conversations were layered. She understood the pull of family. She encouraged compassion. But Britain was not a neutral backdrop in her memory. It was a place where she had felt scrutinized, misrepresented, and at times isolated. The idea of frequent, extended stays carried emotional risk. She had rebuilt her sense of stability in California, and that stability was not something she wished to jeopardize. Compromise emerged as the practical solution. Harry would schedule blocks of time in the UK tied to charitable commitments and private family visits. Meghan would remain primarily in California, focusing on her work and the children's routines. On paper, it was sensible.